Hello everybody and welcome to my channel today. Today we're going to be doing the first of two parts of making a ham from scratch. So we're going to start with brining today, and we will be brining a green ham, which is to say a raw, uncured cut of pork. So let's get started. So the brine I'll be using today is going to be a bourbon apple cider brine that I basically made up on my own, but it's pretty easy to make a brine. A brine is essentially just a marinade, a very salty marinade. Marinating takes a shorter length of time than brining. A marinade can be between about 2 hours and 24 hours. A brine can go all the way up to a week. I made a ham last fall and I brined it for a whole week. It did tend to be a little on the salty side, but it was still super delicious. Brining is sometimes called pickling, particularly when it comes to vegetables. But of course there are other meats that are pickled, especially fish. But today we'll just be brining pork. Almost any kind of vegetable can be brined or pickled. Some of the most common are cucumbers, beets, and other root vegetables. Now, many meats are smoked after brining, but depending on the application, it's not always necessary. The most popular meats that are brined include turkey, chicken, and fish. Brining is a form of food preservation that dates back centuries. When they used to take meat, such as fish, and place it into a salty seawater brine in order to prolong its life. And it prolongs its life by drawing moisture out of the meat through the osmosis of its cells, which kills the bacteria and prevents bacteria from growing as long as the right ratios are met. And those ratios are as follows: about 1 pound or 450 grams of salt to 1 gallon or 4 liters of water. This is considered a 5% salt solution. Alternative to salt, you can use prog number 1, which is also called tint cure or pink curing salt. One ingredient I just want to talk really quick about is this product. This product is not required. It can be replaced with kosher salt. It's very important to use kosher salt or any other non-iodinized salt, as iodine in the salt in a brine can create a bitter flavor. Another note about this product is it's highly toxic. Do not use this in your other cooking. This is specifically made for preserving meats. People actually die from consuming this at as small as an amount as a teaspoon. So there are two types of this product. This is prog number 1. And prog number 2 is the other product. Now, prog number 1 is recommended for meats that require short cures and will be cooked and eaten relatively quickly, like sausages and hams. Prog powder number 2 is recommended for meats that require long, like weeks to months, cures, like hard salami and country ham. Now, with a salt brine, it can include all sorts of ingredients like spices and herbs and fruits. You can tailor it to match your own desires. In addition to preserving the meat, a brine or marinade can result in a more flavorful and tender piece of meat. However, there is some debate out there about the actual impact of brines on meat, but I'm not going to talk about that today. Over-brining can ruin your product by creating an undesirable texture, and the same goes for over-salting. One important thing to remember when you're smoking and brining meats is that the chemical reaction that brining and smoking produces also produces nitrites and nitrates. So if you have any health conditions, make sure you're very careful with the consumption and production of brined and smoked meats. It's important to note that nitrites are actually carcinogenic and have been linked to bowel cancer. But as I always state, it's all about moderation and knowing your health status. So when you're coming up with a brine recipe of your own, you can add juices and herbs and spices. The juices are in addition to the water that you add to the mix. It's very important. It's very important to get the ratios of water to salt correct. Now when it comes to making up your own brine, the most important thing is to remember that ratio. In addition to that, you can add any sorts of liquid you want to it. Juices, beer, wine, fruits. You can add all sorts of things. Since I'll be applewood smoking my ham this year, I've decided to stick with an apple theme. If you want to know more about salts in general, there's a link in the description to a video that was done a few weeks ago on all about salt. I do briefly mention this product, but because this product is the highlight today, I've talked quite a bit about it. All right, so with that in mind, let's get to making the brine. The first thing you want is a large glass or food-safe plastic container that is the right size to submerge fully your cut of meat. Today I'll be using this, which at some point was used for hard cooked and peeled eggs. So let's do this. So first let's take a look at this beautiful cut of pork. This cut is called a ham cut. I have cut it in half because it was much too large to fit in the little smoker that I'm going to be using this fall. First we'll set this aside. First things first, the ratios for your own brine will be different. I will simply tell you what I'm using today, and then whatever recipe you end up with, you should follow that one. Now, the reason that you don't put your prog salt into boiling water is that it can decrease the effectiveness, so always use cold water. For your spices, you'll want to use boiling. So mix these in 2 separate containers. For my spices in my recipe today, I'm using 3 tablespoons of crushed black pepper, a handful of broken cinnamon sticks, a handful of fresh rosemary, and roughly 6 bay leaves. I'll pour hot water over that, and then I will combine the salt and spice mixture and make sure it's dissolved completely before adding the apple cider, the bourbon, and the halved orange. I've decided to skip putting this orange in here as I'm smelling the liquid, and it's very orange forward. So I'm just going to put that aside and skip that for my recipe today. Apple juice and bourbon. And then of course the next step is to submerge your meat. One other thing you can do to improve the brine is inject your meat with brine. And so I'll just inject it in a couple different places. Make sure to cover your container and weight down the top to make sure that the meat stays submerged. Cover it tightly with plastic wrap, or if you have it, a lid, and then put it in the refrigerator for 4 to 7 days. I'm not absolutely sure how long I'm gonna do it for yet. I guess we'll talk about that next time. All right, as stated, my last minute decision was to skip this orange because the orange was way too forward in the brine, and I didn't want it to overpower the ham because I'm not a huge fan of orange flavored things in the first place. So we'll see how that turns out. That is going to stay in the refrigerator for at least 4 days. I'm not sure when I'll be taking it out in order to smoke it, but we'll find that out in the next video. Thank you for watching my content today, and as always, have a wonderful day.